Hello again. Today we are going to talk about basic concepts and emergence of anthropology. As I have told you before, anthropology emerged in a particular period um, after which we broadly call the post-enlightenment period, when uh, the scientific revolution and industrial revolution, these revolutions have taken place, and especially people and scholars in Europe had particular ways and views about knowing about the world around them. And this was also the period when what we call the age of explorations. So Europeans were as going out to explore other continents, uh, to find people to trade with, and it's not true that that was the first time that Europeans encountered other cultures. They had always encountered other cultures because uh, uh, Islamic rulers ruled Europe for several hundreds of years before the age of explorations began. But this time they were encountering the other cultures in a different way, with different kinds of questions. Because by the end of but with the beginning of 19th century, the Europeans have become very aware about who they are, that they are human beings, and the questions were raised if people in other cultures were human beings in the same way as they are, because they have by now become very conscious about this widespread cultural and physical diversity. Uh, And so the question was that did this widespread cultural and physical diversity mean that there was no such thing as unity of the humankind? Because those kind of questions had political implications. The general attitude and mood, as I said, was a kind of sense of superiority on the part of the Europeans. They thought that the rest of the world is less human, and the superiority was in various fields. They thought that there was this cultural superiority, intellectual superiority, and military superiority. So they that in a way justified and justified that they can legitimately intrude into the lives of the non-Europeans, and thought the primitive or these other cultures that they encountered as captive specimens frozen in time. And Europe was a place which was thought to have a history, whereas non-European cultures, it was thought they are part of the prehistory, and they are not yet part of a general history uh, in which Europe dominates. And therefore, there was this idea about uh, having a burden, or it was a responsibility, as if it was a responsibility of the white men to go and civilize um, the people in other continents. Some people say that it was also a garb under which they could control resources, people, trade in other countries. So primitives were thought to be the kind of remnants of what Europe had lost. So Europe thought that the whole idea after Enlightenment they had lost their prehistory, and the primitives are still in that prehistoric stage. And so if you look at the primitives, then you'll know about Europe's past, or what Europe had overcome and should not be uh, again like that. So Europeans started defining themselves, identifying themselves vis-a-vis the non-Europeans. So whatever bad was uh, thought, whatever was virtuous was thought to be European, and whatever which was bad or or kind of backward was thought, or flawed, was thought to be the characteristic of the primitives. So knowing the non-Europeans was a way to find the fundamental truths about humanity, as we can find out from orangutans. So knowing the non-Europeans was also a way to find how humanity looked without rationality. So it was thought the other continents and other cultures, they lack rationality. The only Europeans can think rationally, and others are kind of steeped in sort of tradition and irrational or non-rational thinking and beliefs. So this attitude and mood kind of shaped the study of other cultures, and also shaped initially armchair anthropology, where anthropologists mostly consulted secondary data to talk about, to theorize, to generalize about other cultures. And finally, there was a turning point from when participant observation and collecting qualitative data became the general practice of the anthropologists. So, but anthropology never emerged as a discipline. So there was this practice of people who were lawyers and were in various kinds of professions. They nurtured this curiosity about other cultures and started collecting data from secondary sources and started writing about other cultures. So the practice was already there, and gradually that practice got institutionalized into university departments. And E.B. Tyler, a famous anthropologist of that time, got the first, is said to be the first anthropologist, academic anthropologist, at the University of Oxford in 1883. And E.B. Tyler and many like other anthropologists of his time were mostly armchair anthropologists. They never traveled beyond Europe and mostly collected data from the writings of missionaries and administrators, travelers and explorers, uh, and on the basis of which they generalized about other cultures. So their method of induction was looking at particular data, but not that particular data was not based on any kind of empirical observation, but on based on secondary data. But those secondary data were probably based on empirical observation, but those empirical observations were also clouded by some kind of ideas about the so called natives, which the explorers, travelers, administrators, and missionaries also had at that time. And they usually thought that the customs of the non-Europeans are mostly flawed, and they had this idea about of superiority of their culture over the cultures of the non-Europeans, which means they had an ethnocentric attitude. Um, and once James Fraser, a very famous anthropologist, and who wrote a huge treatise, a book called Golden Bough. When he was asked if he would like to meet with the people about whom he wrote, he said, "God forbid." And then came a turning point when anthropologists realized that it is not enough to uh, base their arguments, base their generalizations on secondary data. So they started uh, institutionalizing field work, and anthropologists passing out of universities had to go and interact with the people whom they are studying. So field work became mandatory, and induction had to be based on empirical data. And the pioneers of this were this particular trend in anthropology of field work where these two very important persons and very renowned anthropologists, one in Great Britain, which is Bronislaw Malinowski, and the other in United States, German immigrant to United States, Franz Boas. And Malinowski studied the Trobriand islanders in South Pacific. Now, as fieldwork became institutionalized, there several questions were again cropped up, and the questions that cropped up were similar to the questions which were raised before, but people thought that fieldwork will kind of solve those problems, but fieldwork does not or did not make anthropology kind of innocent, because no matter how much one goes and stays and lives with the so-called natives and the people whom one is studying, they could not have had that kind of attitude that was nurtured in an environment in which the Europeans thought that they are superior. So the question that rose was, does the privileged Westerner have the right to study a non-Western culture? That was a moral question. And then there were the ontological questions, the assumptions that the field worker had, the anthropologist had about the non-Western people. Uh, are they correct about their ways of life? Sometimes anthropologists thought that the non-Western customs had been going on for ages, for thousands of years. They do not have any history. They did not change over a period of time. Was that true? So that was an ontological assumption, the state of being of the people whom the anthropologists are going to study. So what you see, but that is based on what you already know about what you see, what you already assume about what you see. And then there was the epistemological questions, which is it possible for the anthropologists, or Western anthropologists, to interpret someone else's culture? Because if even if one interacts and lives with that a particular group for a year or more, one has to first translate those perspectives into first the Western perspectives and then to the anthropological perspectives. So these were the questions, these are the problems that were raised. So given that there were these problems, I would like you to go back to this cartoon that you have already seen on the website, and where two anthropologists are coming and the so-called natives are hiding things and shouting, anthropologists, anthropologists. So the question is, what is the cartoonist saying about the epistemology and ontology of fieldwork and anthropology in that cartoon? So you'll go to the discussion board and comment on the cartoon. Thank you so much, and that is all for today.